profusely apologize for the delay in this session. Without wasting any more time, I would like to call upon stage Mr. Prasun Roy, the author of the book that is under discussion today, A Samurai Dream of Azad Hind, Rash Behari Bose. Sir has authored two other books, Ringo and the Yogi, and the book The Good Wizard. We are happy that he consented to travel all the way from Calcutta to be here with us. Welcome, sir. Sir, if you could sit in the other side, please. Thank you. Next on stage, I would like to invite Mr. Pradeep Singh, who's an historian and author of Suswa Saga, a family narrative of Eastern Dehradun, published in 2011, and The Sals of the Valley, a memorial to Dehradun, published in 2017. He's one of the foremost chroniclers of the city of Dehradun. Thank you for coming here, sir. Next on stage, we have Mr. Kulbhushan Kain, who's been in the education sector for nearly 4 decades. He's helped establish the Delhi Public School Society. He's been principal and director of many schools, and he's a prominent writer, especially on stories about Dehradun. Thank you for being here, sir. Lastly, to chair this session, we have Dr. Lokesh Ohri, who is an Indian anthropologist, a historian, a writer, a very popular figure in Dehradun. He runs a cultural heritage preservation group called Bin There Doon That. He is also the convener of the Dehradun chapter of InTouch. A very warm welcome, sir. The book under discussion today is a book on Rash Behari Bose. Just to give you some context of the book, yesterday, around the same time on this same stage, we had a book discussion on 9 formative texts that helped shape the idea of India. Sadly, the two people under discussion, Rash Behari Bose and M.N. Roy, could not find any space. So possibly to atone for that sin, we are going to have one full session on this. I wouldn't like to waste any more time. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and a very big thank you to Valley of Words, the festival that has invited us to be a part of this session, the Legends of Doon. So we are going to talk about 2 legends, and 2 stalwarts from Dehradun would be talking about these 2 legends. But before we get into the discussion, I would request all panelists to please unveil Prasun Roy's wonderful book, The Samurai Dream of Azad Hind. The book is about, of course, it's about Rash Behari Bose, who had a very strong Dehradun connection and lived in Dehradun. And of course, I will not reveal too much because it is up to the speakers to talk about this legend. But so maybe we can unveil the book, and then we can ask Prasun to say something about the book and about his why he chose to write about Rash Behari Bose, and it's a fascinating journey that begins in Bengal and then brings Rash Behari Bose to Dehradun to work in the FRI. And I've always admired the spunk of this gentleman who went and bombed the Viceroy one day and came back and rejoined work the next day in the FRI, welcomed the Viceroy a little later in the FRI. So, but yeah, I shouldn't be saying too much about this. And so maybe we can all stand, and I'd request the panelists to please unveil the book.
Can we have a warm round of applause, please? Thank you, sir.
So may I now request Prasun to, maybe if you'd like to speak from here.
Yes. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Prasun Roy, and I'm really happy and honored to be a part of the Valley of Words Lit Fest, and equally honored to be a part of this panel of so many eminent people over here. Like Sir asked, why did I choose to write about Sri Rash Behari Bose? You know, Rash Behari Bose is a name which is a legend. But unfortunately, in our country, we have completely forgotten him. He was one man who had a dream from the age of 10 years of age, a dream to free his country, to make it independent, which he dreamt, and he followed it till his last breath. He was one man who tried to do everything. At the age of 15, he wanted to join the army because he thought that if he joins the army and gets a formal education in the army, he would be able to fight the imperial rulers in a better way. So that was a different kind of thought that he had, which drove him into a restless soul throughout his life. And there's another interesting thing is, at that point of time, he was driven across the country because his father was always trying to save him from becoming a revolutionary. But he was always finding a way to join that organization. So he was born in a small district, Bardhaman, in West Bengal. From there, he was shifted to Chandan Nagar, where his father was employed. Over there, he had scuffles with the British school teachers. So he was literally thrown out of school. His father took him to Kolkata, where he again joined the Jugantar. And like that, he was then sent to Shimla Press by his father so that he can, his father was also employed at the Shimla Press. But over there were two factions. One was pro-British and another was against, and he was verbose in that against group. Again, his father sent him to Kasauli so that he's, totally out of the reach of any such activities. But partition of Bengal brought him back. And then he came to Dehradun. His life at Dehradun was a fascinating one. He was here from the year, I guess, 1907. He stayed at the Tagore Villa estate. There was an outhouse over there. And not many know that the caretaker of that house was Mr. Atul Chandra Ghosh. He was a caretaker over there who was also a supporter of the revolutionary activities. And he introduced him to Jitendra Mohan Chatterjee, who was in Saharanpur and had come to attend a wedding over here. So that is how he got in touch with so many, Amarendranath Chatterjee. Then through Amarendra, he got in touch with Rishi Aurobindo, and his entire journey began. And here in Dehradun, he was actually making the bombs, manufacturing the bombs in ink pots and in cigarette cans that they had procured. And that object was used to bomb the Viceroy at Chandni Chowk. It was a significant event, and the British capital was getting shifted from Calcutta to Delhi. And during that time, he bombed the Viceroy. So it was not a very simple act. And he came back immediately to Dehradun. And when the Viceroy, Lord Hardinge, came, Hardinge had written it in his biography also, that while he was passing by the FRI, there were a group of Indians who were very active in their salams to the Viceroy. And the leader of that group was Rash Behari Bose. And he even got invited to the circuit house to meet Rash Behari Bose. And he was like, oh, this is so bad. They shouldn't have done this. But he was the one behind it. And he didn't keep quiet at that time also. Because he couldn't kill the Viceroy, he was now against a person called G. Gordon, who was the superintendent of Lahore at that time. And he planned an attack on Gordon. And his accomplice was a young boy of 17 years of age called Basanti Viswas, who took these two bombings in his own hand. And Rash Behari was there following the whole plan. Basanti got hanged also in a year or so. And after that, another point which comes about Rash Behari Bose is his organizational skills. During that age when there was no social media, no internet, nothing, at that time, he was able to connect the East with the North and convince 26 regiments of British Indian forces to revolt against the British. It was no ordinary job. The World War I was unfolding, and he became instrumental, reaching out to each of these regiments and convincing them that you attack. And then, unfortunately, because there were traitors who leaked out that plan, and Rash Behari Bose was also a master of disguise. He disguised himself and got out from there. And the British had by then got a hint of who he was, who was the mastermind behind all these activities, and he had to run away to Japan for lifelong. Many say that Rash Behari Bose left India and he became a Japanese citizen. He had his family there. He forgot his country. But I would say no, because even when he was in Japan, he landed in Japan on 15th of May 1915, and with the knowledge of 4 Japanese words only. Then, within the next 20 years, he was able to establish himself into somebody whose words the Imperial General Headquarters of Japan also used to respect. And over there, he convinced the Japanese army, the Japanese government to support the Indian cause. And it was also not an easy job for any particular person, because he was by then a citizen of Japan. And when he was talking to the Japanese authorities and telling them that give this army a total sovereignty, they can act on their own, he's actually saying something against a country where he's a citizen now. And he has to prove to his Indian counterparts that he was not a Japanese spy who was trying to make a subsidiary army out of the INA. And the INA became the world's first and the largest voluntary army. So Rash Behari Bose is the mastermind behind such a big revolution. And we seldom discuss about him. Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose collaborated with him. There was no ego between them. He handed over the reins to Netaji happily, because he believed that, the revolution needs to go on. The country needs to be free. They might not know my name, but the country has to get its freedom. Today, when we are celebrating this Amrit Mahotsav, we see people putting international heroes on coffee mugs, on t-shirts. Why not make these heroes a part of our popular culture? We don't need to make them into deities and gods and put garlands on their photographs and put them at a corner of our house. They need to be part of our everyday life. They need to be celebrated as popular icons, and then only their legends would live. So that's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Prasun. It's wonderful hearing you talk so passionately about Rash Behari Bose. And I'm sure your research would have brought you to Dehradun several times to understand this person who was because when you talk about Rash Behari Bose coming to Japan and people saying that he forgot about his country, I'm always reminded of the Nakumaraya curry that he introduced and became such an important part of the culinary culture of Japan.
Curry,
yeah, please go ahead.
That curry is still there at the Shinjuku station in Tokyo. They still sell that curry, and they sell about 1 million helpings every year. So that remains to this day.
Yes, of course. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for doing this work. And I think it's a wonderful book, wonderful effort, and all of you should buy it and read it, not borrow it. So thank you so much for doing this. And of course, this session is about Legends of Doon. So we will be talking about Rash Behari Bose, but we will also be talking about M.N. Roy, the two Bengalis. And I would also like to add the third one, Rabindranath Tagore's son, who made Dehradun his home. But today we are going to talk about these two, Rash Behari ji and M.N. Roy. For me, it's a little intimidating to be on stage and being asked to chair a session where two of your school seniors are the speakers. So I think it's quite quite funny as well that a junior is chairing a session where two stalwarts of Dehradun are going to talk. So what I would request both of you gentlemen is to focus more upon these people's connect with Dehradun and of course trace their life's journey. So I think we can begin with Pradeep ji, and I'd request you to talk about Rash Behari Bose.
Okay, a very good evening. First of all, I must thank Prasun that he's done quite a lot of my work. In the sense, I was supposed to tell you something about it, but he has since, see, it's better to hear it from the horse's mouth, and the author happens to be here. So you've already got a good idea of what Rash Behari Bose was all about, and he has also revealed to you to some extent how he was connected with Dehradun. So I won't repeat most of the things what he has said, but I will take this opportunity to contextualize the situation. Because frankly, my background is history, so I personally believe that without a context, neither a story, neither a biography, neither an idea can be understood unless you understand the context in which it has come. So, both for M.N. Roy and for Rash Behari Bose, it is very necessary to understand the context in which they were placed. Now, both are leaders, and in certain section of the people, they're considered to be revolutionary leaders. Of course, revolution is anything, I mean, now generally it is accepted that revolutionary is something which you do with arms and with, with kind of force and things like that. But in my perception, revolution is anything, it may be an idea which is not acceptable to the dominant ideology of the time. So it need not be armed revolution, it can be a revolution on idea which overthrows a particular hegemony. So I will just contextualize Rash Behari Bose's position and partly also M.N. Roy. See, Rash Behari Bose and M.N. Roy both come at a time where there is a kind of a vacuum in the Congress. Both are, Rash Behari Bose, like when he comes to Dehradun, he comes in 1906. Now 1906 is a peculiar year in the history of the Congress. In the sense that Gandhiji hasn't come to India. There is no Gandhi in India at that time. Who are heading the nationalist movement over here are people like Gokhale, Rana De, Tilak, and a few other people around them. Now, these people who are already leading the so-called nationalist movement were themselves in a flux. How do you take on an imperialist power which has every instrument of terror, instrument of force, the power of the state behind them to, kind of neutralize you. So the moderates, there was a faction in the Congress called the moderates, headed by Gopal Kishan Gokhale and his cohort. And Tilak was taking an extreme line. But both these people, both these factions, they were called the moderates and the extremists. The moderates were the ones who were saying that, okay, we will petition the government. We will agree, we will kind of plead to the good nature of British democracy and see that, they kind of give us more freedom and, to be a little more self-governing. Tilak and all were saying we need to put pressure. After putting pressure, we will have compromise with the government. Again, we'll put pressure and then we'll put compromise. In between, what happens is Lord Curzon, he was the Viceroy of India at that time. Now, this gentleman decides to, they were imperialists. They were not interested in your welfare. That is the fundamental facts of colonialism. So at that point of time, Bengal was on a fervor. Bengal was on a boil. And British just couldn't understand that a province which had a huge majority of Muslims and an equally huge a number of Hindus were together in the fight against the British. So they decided to partition Bengal. And I would say this is a pilot which they probably had in mind, the civil servants had in mind that later on they will partition India at some point of time. So they did it in a pilot, they partitioned Bengal But sadly, not for any good geopolitical reasons, but purely for the reason that the eastern part of Bengal was Muslim dominated, western part of Bengal was perhaps more Hindu dominated, or with more population of Hindu. So they decided in 1905 to partition Bengal. For no reason, except that they wanted to see that if they could divide the national movement, the movement in Bengal, which was taking a shape, on religious lines, and to create a kind of a fault line between two communities, just to kind of put national movement on a back foot. It did reverse. They were surprised that once they had partitioned Bengal, they realized that it didn't happen. In fact, that is the time where Rash Behari Bose and all the Bengal youth just got together and they said, look, we have to fight British nationalism, British imperialism, and they took to terror because for some reason there was a vacuum of leadership at the top which could control this youth over there. So they went in for a lot of activity which we call so-called terrorism, and so-called terrorist acts were taking place in Bengal. So Rash Behari Bose is a kind of iconic figure in that part of that psychology in Bengal. And M.N. Roy is also in a way coming out from there. Now, Rash Behari Bose, he tries his level best to, indoctrinate or to, plead his case with the youth in Bengal. But somehow or the other, his initial move was that I will go. He was very convinced that if he is able to make a breakthrough in the British Army, in the units which were largely, basically Indian soldiers, he thought he would be able to, kind of have a scenario where these Indian soldiers in the British Army would rebel. So he tried to get recruited into the British Indian Army at least 4 to 5 times, and all the time he was rejected. So his coming to Dehradun was out of dejection because he said, now where do I go? He still wanted to get into the government because he said, I must work from inside. So he couldn't get into the British Army, so next big unit he could find a job was in the FRI. So Forest Research of India, at that time it was called the Imperial College, and it had already been, they started calling for Forest Research of India. 1906 they had established, they had shifted from Imperial Forestry College to FRI. Now FRI at that time, today if I ask FRI, everybody pictures that majestic building, which you see on Chakrata Road. Well, that was not FRI when Rash Behari Bose came. FRI was in Chandbagh, and Chandbagh is where today Doon School is. When FRI was operating out of Chandbagh, and there, in 22 the construction of FRI started, and 26 it got made. It took 28 it got made. So in 28 Chandbagh was vacated and they went to FRI thing. And 1928 the property lay khali in Chandbagh, and then 1935 Doon School started there. So Rash Behari Bose and FRI, when we talk, is not FRI on Chakrata Road, but FRI at Chandbagh. And as Prasun has already said, there is a bit of a misconception that Rash Behari Bose was staying in Ghosi Gali in Paltan Bazaar. Perhaps when he came, he may have stayed for a few days, but largely it is factually correct that he didn't stay there, he stayed in Tagore Villa. Now, Tagore Villa, as most of the people from Dehradun know, is an area between the Bindal and what we call today the Connaught Place. So that was an estate which belonged to Prafulla Nath Tagore. He's one of the Tagore branch. His sister was married to Rabindranath Tagore, if I am mistaken. Yes. So he's from the same lineage, parallel lineage of the Thakurs of Bengal, and very close to Rabindranath Tagore. So he had a 100 bigha, which is approximately 20-acre property villa. I mean, for a majestic villa over there. And there was a big outhouse over there at one corner in an orchard. So Rash Behari Bose in 1906, when he came here, he came and stayed there. And apparently he was probably tutoring some of the boys who were on the estate. And at the same time, he got a job in FRI because FRI was probably recruiting clerical and non-officer staff. So he got employment in the chemistry department of FRI. In the chemistry department, there was one gentleman who was heading it. His name was Sardar Puran Singh. So Sardar Puran Singh was in charge of the chemistry department. And Rash Behari Bose took employment in that department at a clerical level. But Rash Behari Bose had a background of science as well as medicine before coming here. He has worked in the he had worked in Kasauli, he had worked in other places. So he came and he joined the chemistry department, and then back in Chandanagar, where he had studied, he had learned the basics, the fundamentals of putting a bomb together. Because he had knowledge of chemistry, and he put his knowledge of chemistry together, but he learned much more when he came to Dehradun, and without letting anybody know, because this was a very secluded state in Tagore Villa. So he used to put it together and try it out, but the pilot which he made, he took it all the way to Bengal, to Hooghly, on the banks of Hooghly, they tried it out, whether it would succeed or not. But the problem at that time was that where do you find a proper container to put this explosive material? Because British government was not off the shelf available. So he had some issues, so we'll come to that later if we have time. But my basic purpose in telling was that we need to understand where do we situate Rash Behari Bose in that struggle for freedom. So I will take an analogy from history or from sociology. You see, in any organization or any system, ecosystem, there is a dominant ideology and there is a subordinate ideology. Or you call, see, it's like this. There are two cultures, the dominant culture and the subordinate culture. So the dominant culture at the time of the freedom movement was the culture of the Congress. And Congress was going on with the mindset of that we will have a non-violent civil disobedience movement against the British and not a violent one. And the subordinate culture, I would say, was the one which was coming, which was saying that we will have an armed struggle. So what happens is when two cultures, a subordinate culture and a dominant culture, come together, there is one possibility. Either the dominant culture subsumes the subordinate culture and culturizes them, or if the subordinate culture is so powerful that it kind of takes over the dominant culture. So Rash Behari Bose as well as M.N. Roy are I would say, in the subordinate culture of the freedom movement. This is where I would place them, because it is necessary to understand where they are. From my point of view, studying Rash Behari Bose is studying history from the margins. And I would congratulate Prasun, because you see, we have a very good narrative of the national movement and the history. But there is a history to be written from the margins. And writing by people like Rash Behari Bose and M.N. Roy, these are writings from the margins. And when you write from the margins, you enrich the mainstream of history. So I personally feel your book will go in a way to put Rash Behari Bose in a proper perspective. I thought, rather than talking about him in Dehradun, which you have already done so, and you would love to know nuts and bolts of his Dehradun stay, then go no further than this. Okay? So I thought I'll just put the context there and not bore you with nitty-gritty, because I don't want to reveal what's there in this book. It's a very readable book, and it is profusely illustrated with photographs which you have never seen before. So kindly go ahead. It's a very readable book, and you can read it comfortably. It's about 2-3 hours read, and you can reread it also. So I wouldn't say much more than that and not take more time, but I thought I'll put the context in place.
Thank you very much, Pradeep ji. It was wonderful listening to you, and maybe we'll request you sometime to curate a Bose walk for us and take us through Tagore Villa and talk more about if it exists, the way it exists now. So unfortunately, we have to live with that reality. This brings us to the discussion on another Bengali gentleman who made Dehradun his home. When you go to Dalanwala and you drive past Mohini Road, so 13 Mohini Road is the humanist house, and Kulbhushan ji has done a lot of research on M.N. Roy, and so without wasting much time, I'd request you, sir, to talk about M.N. Roy, but if you could also tell us about whether Rash Behari Bose and M.N. Roy ever met or their paths crossed each other, and then we can talk about M.N. Roy, and then we will open the house to questions.
Thank you very much. First of all, great privilege to be sitting with Dr. Lokesh, Ohri, and Dr. Pradeep Singh. I'm the only non-doctor here. So if you fall ill, we have two doctors here, even though they are academic doctors. A great privilege, and I have a great interest in M.N. Roy. And my interest actually, I wrote the dissertation on M.N. Roy when I was a student of MPhil at the Punjab University. And I was comparing the Gandhian movement with the communists. So my dissertation was titled Gandhi and the Communist Movement in India. And in that thing, I got to read a lot of M.N. Roy. Though I had studied M.N. Roy in Delhi University, but when I got into studying Gandhi and the communist movement, then I had to do a lot of reading on M.N. Roy. And M.N. Roy still was very external to me. And I forgot about him. I got my MPhil degree. Because of this, I got a job. When I was teaching in a school, I didn't have to have my MPhil thesis. The basic textbooks were there. So M.N. Roy was not even a part of the curriculum. Then I came to Dehradun again. And I was talking one evening over dinner with some friends, and I said कि अभी M.N. Roy यहाँ कहीं रहता था. And mind you, this was a very intelligent, very perceptive, very successful human being. Obviously, I won't name him or her. I won't even give you a hint whether it's him or her. So this very perceptive human being said, who? I said, M.N. Roy. They said, who M.N. Roy? So I said, you haven't heard of M.N. Roy? I thought maybe the synonymous, I said, Manamendra Nath Roy? Narendra Nath Bhattacharya was once upon a time. They said, no. Kaun hoga? Now, this is something which disturbed me a lot. Because M.N. Roy, I think this is one of the finest political thinkers that we've ever had. And a very seminal mind. I'm not going to go into details because that would bore you a little bit, because in case I can get you interested in studying M.N. Roy, I think so I will have done my job. And I would start by saying that his life is in 4 different phases. And I'm not going to go into any phase. I'll come back to your question and about this. The first one was he was a revolutionary. And that's the time between what Roy has talked about, during the time of the Gadar movement, and during the time when he was a member of the Anushulan Samiti, and he became a member of its more radical wing called the Jugantar, which used to publish a paper. He took part in lootings, he took part in shootings, he killed people. And from there, to get German support, he went to Java, Sumatra. The Germans let him down once. He went again. The Germans let him down twice. He failed again. Then he went from here, ran to Japan. And that's the time where he met Rash Behari Bose. In Japan, in around the year 1915, when he was also on the run, M.N. Roy, because he had failed getting arms and money from the Germans, and the Gadar movement had failed, M.N. Roy went, he pursued, he said, I'll go and get the money from and arms. He went to the Philippines, he went to Singapore, and he landed in Japan. And in Japan, he landed and met with his old friend, Rash Behari Bose. It was not the first time they were meeting. Rash Behari Bose and M.N. Roy had actually collaborated because they were both members of the Anushulan Samiti. In 1907, they met for the first time. Right? And they were in touch with Savarkar also, and they were in touch with other Indian revolutionaries. So they had met, and then he went to them, and then Rash Behari Bose told him, he says, listen, I don't think so we can do much from Japan. Why don't you go to China and go and meet the German ambassador there and get money from there? So then became the chase that M.N. Roy started going. He went to China. The German ambassador told him to go to Germany because the amount he was asking could only be sanctioned by the Kaiser, the king of them. And he says, go, we'll give you a false passport. Rash Behari Bose was a master in disguise. But M.N. Roy changed his name 11 times. M.N. Roy is a very interesting human being. You please must read about him. I'm cutting out the flab. I'm trying to make the narrative what I'm best at doing and trying to tell you a story. M.N. Roy changed his name. When he landed in San Francisco, he was disguised as a Christian padri by the name of Charles Allen, bearded, carrying a leather-bound Bible. And he says, I am a padri. So where are you off to? I'm going to Paris. Oh, well, good. They said, there's an Indian revolutionary also on the run. They said, no, he's carrying a Bible. You see, it requires, you have to get into M.N. Roy's place. I'm deviating a little bit from Rash Behari, because Rash Behari Bose has already been spoken about. In England, in America, now I'm coming to an interesting part. Now he's still a revolutionary. He's an Indian on the run. He's looking for arms and money from Germany. Germany is opposed to England. England is ruling India. He can overthrow England by German support, by arms, by ammunition, by money. So he's collaborating with the British. And he's a revolutionary. He'll do anything to get it. But it brings me to the second part. This is a very interesting part. And that, I wish Ida Pandey was here, because there's a woman in Indian history, not one, there will be 5 women who contributed to M.N. Roy's. The first woman he met in San Francisco was Evelyn Trent. Right now, we all love these love stories, don't we? He went there. Evelyn Trent was a communist. She was supporting the Indian effort against the British. She was a student at Stanford University. Those of us who know about American universities know Stanford, right? She was a student at Stanford University. Rash Behari, M.N. Roy met her at his friend Mukherjee's house. Mukherjee was dating her friend. Mukherjee got married to her friend. M.N. Roy fell in love with this lady. And she converted M.N. Roy into a communist because she was a communist. Power of woman. Ira, not here.
Yes, you must say that. I like your line, power of women.
आप उसकी कहानी जरूर पढ़ना, Evelyn. I'll tell you a very interesting thing. Story. I'm telling you a story. I'm not talking to you as an academic. So he fell in love with Evelyn Trent. She went and introduced him from. You see what happened is M.N. Roy realized later on that his landlord was a police chief of San Francisco, and that fellow had got a clue. Yeah, this guy is shady. She told, let's move. She moved him from there to New York. And New York, she introduced him to Bulganin, who was a communist. You see, to understand M.N. Roy, or for that matter, Rash Behari Bose, context, very important. Events, very important. Sequence of events, even more important. Otherwise, you get confused. He went to New York. She took him to New York, introduced him to Bulganin. He became a communist. He said, no, this revolutionary terrorism does not work. It will not work. We have to bring out a revolution from below. It has to be a mass movement. तो Pradeep ये mass movement था इनका, लेकिन चला नहीं, गांधी का चल गया. गांधी का चल गया. मुबारक हो उसको. But don't. But this is the fact I'm talking. I love Gandhi. I love Gandhi. You see, I did work on Gandhi and the communist movement, right?
Let's stick to
you'll
M.N.
have to
Roy.
guess who I love. I love Gandhi.
So let's stick to M.N. Roy.
Now, 1 minute, just before I think we are running short of time. Lokesh is a junior. He will not tell me to stop. I know that. There is the more important moment in his life. Acha, wo mila usko, Lala Lajpat Rai was also in New York at that time. So when he was listening to a lecture of Lala Lajpat Rai at Columbia University, the cops came on him. Somebody told him, yeah, there's a fellow and this lady whom he is there with, they are communists and they are traitors. इनको पकड़ लो. Somebody leaked the thing out. Lala Lajpat Rai ने बताया भाग जा यहाँ. So he went to Mexico. Both of them. They got married in 1917, right? The marriage lasted for 8 years. At this time, from this time onwards, from 1917 to 1925, they were happily married. Something happened, and they divorced in 1925. But I'll come back to that. It's a very romantic part of. You see, revolutionaries are very romantic also. Don't just dismiss them. Yeah, they're revolutionary terrorists. They have Dipanshu would know that. So anyway, so they came back. 1925, he crossed swords with Lenin, with Stalin. Stalin wanted to get him executed. He came to know about him. Somebody told him, run from here. He ran from Russia. He leaked a letter which Lenin wrote to him. And he said something that this Stalin has said, so you have to agree. When Stalin came to know, he said, why are you quoting me? This letter was confidential. So from that time he knew, because Stalin never would leave. They ran from there, came back to Europe. This lady, Evelyn Trent, left him, M.N. Roy left her. There was a serious disagreement over communistic theory, right? How the affair was on ideas totally. Ask the kids these days who go on WhatsApp, they have no idea of communism. Oh, disagreement ho gaya uske saath. He left her. He never talked to her. She tried 4 times. Her family rejected her because she had married a revolutionary. Right? He came back to India, and before he came back to India, he met the second woman who was very important in his life. And that is the woman who died here in Dehradun, and whose case Pradeep's father was involved in a little bit, right? Now, that was Ellen Couchstock. She was a Parisian Jew, very well educated. She fell in love with M.N. Roy after he had left Russia, after Evelyn Trent had divorced him. In between, he was very friendly with 2 women. One was Gressler and the other one. And then he started living with Ellen. And then, of course, M.N. Roy came back to India. He came back. He was put into prison from 1931 to 1936. He had not married Ellen at that time, God's walk. He had not married, but she continued to write from him. Some of the letters which were written between them is something you people must read. I don't have the time, but I'm going to write a book on this part of M.N. Roy. He was asking me. And I'm going to write about M.N. Roy, the unrevolutionary, right? And, oh, इतनी अच्छी है, आपको अभी तो time नहीं है.
May I interrupt you?
There was an exchange of letters. I have got 5-6 letters of him. And needless to say, सुननी है आपको? नहीं, आप आ जाओगे. Anyway, so they wrote the letters. M.N. Roy wrote to her. He says, I miss you very much. She says, Berlin is hopeless. It's shrouded in clouds. He says, but you are the sun shining there. I want to get to Berlin. She says, keep on your... So this kind of exchanges, number of exchanges that took place. They were allowed only 1 letter in a month. But he was in prison for 6 years. She did a lot of work to get him released. His sentence was of 12 years. She lobbied. Even Einstein she took on her side. Albert Einstein, Andre Malraux, Jawaharlal Nehru. They wrote to the British, release this guy. You see? Then finally his sentence was reduced to 6. And when he came out, the first thing they did was they got married. And in 1937, he got married and came to Dehradun, and he started living here on Dalanwala.
So I'll interrupt you there, sir. I'll interrupt you there. I can see that a lot of people in the audience.
She died here, he died here.
We are running out of time. So maybe we can open the house to questions. And so ma'am wanted to say something.
Good evening, everybody. I see all my, recognizable faces from Prasun to Lokesh to Pradeep Singh to Kulbhushan Kain. No, I just wanted to say, I was audible enough, right? No, okay. I just wanted to say that you started off saying that if in your short discourse you could change over one person's interest to M.N. Roy, I know, I'm sure you've changed many people's interest, but you've got one confirmed one, for sure. I've become an M.N. Roy acolyte, and I'm going to read about him. So you're happy now, Kulbhushan, right? Absolutely. Oh, God, there you go. There you go. But thank you
See,
so much.
There you are. The publisher of Prasun's book.
No, I don't have. I have not written. I will write about it. I will write, Aruna, and if it sells half the amount of books that your book sells, I would be. I'm in the middle of writing it. Yeah, so then I'll call you for the launch in case. Yeah.
So, any other questions? Any comments? Yes, sir.
I have the privilege of being the neighbor of Mr. M.N. Roy.
Wow, great.
I reside at 18 Mohini Road, and his residence was 11 Mohini Road.
13.
13
Huh?
or 11? 30 more.
11. Huh?
Chaliye.
And I very well remember what it looked like and what now it looks like, where he used to reside.
Did you meet Ellen or anybody? No.
You just told that she died in
1960. 1960, she was murdered.
murdered. Yes, yes, I was trying to remember. And one Mr. Suresh was involved as his murderer. He was named. He was my neighbor also.
Maybe sir would.
Anyway, I do not know who else was involved, but the two people who the police apprehended and prosecuted were two boys. They were just, I think, out of teens. One was Basant and other was Chetri.
Basant, yes. Yes. Yeah. And they used to live opposite side at 15 Moni Road, I think so. That's all.
Very good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. If we have any other question.
Sir, I have a question if there's.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Right. Do you think if Rash Behari Bose and M.N. Roy were alive today, given the fact that they traverse the entire political ideological spectrum from extreme left to extreme right, would they be cancelled on Twitter?
I don't know about, well, this is a typical a question which I don't think there's an answer for that. But yes, you see, Rash Behari Bose himself cancelled his revolutionary. If I can just quote you one line from him, which will answer you, and I think I won't take more than a minute. Just I will take a second. See, Rash Behari Bose, despite the fact that he was a diehard, armed revolutionary, he wanted to be an armed revolutionary, he couldn't be, but his ideology was very much there. But what does he write? He writes to Mahatma Gandhi, In conclusion, it's a long letter, I'm just reading the conclusion. In conclusion, I must say, the principle of Satyagraha is essence of all religions and antidote to sectarianism, dogmatism and demagogy. India's mission lies in turning this principle into a living force. She cannot accomplish until she achieves complete freedom from the British rule. I therefore decided on this occasion to contribute my quota to the cause of making India for Indians and to cooperate with Japan, whose objective in the present war of Greater Asia is to make Asia for Asian. I shall be greatly pleased to receive your blessings in my present undertaking. He is asking Mahatma Gandhi to bless him. And then he writes to Nehru, Dear Pandit Nehru, personally and on behalf of the Indians in East Asia, I think it is fortunate for the Congress and for India to have chosen you as the leader at this critical juncture. Mahatma Gandhi too, I believe, has shown another instance of his depth of vision by declaring you as his successor, even during his lifetime. My faith in you is based upon sound reasoning. You were the first Congress president due to whose influence the Congress did away with dominion status as its ultimate goal and substituted it with complete independence. See, this letter I am quoting, and there are many instances he has written. See, at the end, he accepts that armed revolution, he says in the sense that I only wanted to supplement what Gandhi and others were doing. He never said that I wanted to replace what Gandhi and others were doing. Because he accepts that for leading a pan-India movement, revolutionary, the armed revolution is not going to work. And Mahatma Gandhi's non-violent civil disobedience movement was the only movement which was perhaps possible all across India because it was non-violent and it was civil disobedience. Being non-violent didn't mean that it was weak movement. It was something which made every Indian a soldier, whereas armed struggle would have meant only a handful of people with guns and arms, which the British could have neutralized like this. Okay, so even in his dying moments, he says Mahatma Gandhi is the right leader, and he's chosen Pandit Nehru as his deputy.
I just before you conclude, my final thing about what happened. We all know Ellen was murdered, right? What happened to Evelyn Trent, his first wife? They had a tremendous impact. Both of them shaped M.N. Roy's life. One took him out from terrorism and made him a communist. The other actually changed him from a communist into a radical humanist. That's a philosophy which he gave up all kinds of violence. What happened to Evelyn Trent? Very interesting. 1970, Evelyn Trent's house got burnt down in Germany. She never came to India, unlike Ellen. M.N. Roy didn't mention her anywhere. There's not a single word after 1926. M.N. Roy wrote so much, not a single word on Evelyn Trent. So was he such a cold man that after he left her, he never bothered? Well, the historians thought so. Till in 1970, her nephew handed over a photograph to the archives, which is there with us. I have not seen the photograph. I would like to see it. It was a photograph of Evelyn Trent, old photograph, and on the flip side was written by hand by M.N. Roy, to my goddess and from your worshipper, and dated 1953. He died in 1954. So could he have still been associated with her? We don't know. That is for something. Maybe when you write another book. That's what
When M.N. Roy passed away, the Amrita Bazaar Patrika wrote about him a line which said he was the lonely lion who roamed around the world.
Thank you so much. This is just one last question before we end.
The answer probably has to come from the people. Why they're not reading it? I mean,
the characters are from the past.
Okay.
We still worship them.
Yeah.
We admire them. We talk about
Yeah.
them. We inspire them.
Yeah.
Give me a few characters in today's generation who you would like to read and follow the same way we follow the ones we are trying to.
Yeah. I guess you're looking for contemporary icons. Yeah. Idea leaders. See, I think the ideas are still cooking. We'll have to wait. Next generation will.
So we do not have such characters anymore. Let's accept that.
Yeah.
Are you interested enough in M.N. Roy and Rash Behari Bose?
I am not.
Then we have won the battle at least today.
I would love to know about them. I don't read too many books.
They're amazing people. I tell you, we just don't.
I just say a word. See, no great idea loses its strength and value. Once they are reduced to books, these are great minds which are available on the shelf, right? You meet a great person. Suppose I won't name a person. A lot of people are wanting to meet some XYZ. They meet him for 1 minute. They'll talk about him for 10 minutes, 10 hours, 10, and they tell their grandchildren. Whereas they're meeting with a great person is only for 1 minute. Whereas a great person is available on your shelf to talk to you anytime and talk to you what he wants to tell you. So always the shelf is never ever going to be, great minds are going to be available in books. Do read them.
Also,
cover us. Maybe we will write about them in posterity.
No, no, the heroes are very much amongst us. Their deification will become, you know, India is a country where somebody dies, then only he becomes a hero.
I am impressed by Prasun being so young because when I did not know him earlier. This is your first or second book, I also don't know. So when I came for this session, listening to all of you, I saw a very young guy asking about a thing which I would love it. So this was a beautiful combination.
Okay,
Thank you so much, such well spoken. Very good. And you're a grand storyteller also. So
Thank you so much.
And since
Yeah.
I'm an artist, I could feel he was like, then he did this, and then so voice also changed. But aap to kamal hai.
Thank you so much. And the animated discussion, Dipankarji, one second. So the animated discussion
Propagated. He's a very important human being. Please read it.
We will, sir.
tells us that, yes, please, yeah, quickly.
So many Bengali revolutionists were always very romantic. Starting from
And I think this session also gives us, an opportunity to reflect why at that point in time Dehradun attracted so many intellectuals, so many great minds, and are we the same Dehradun? Are we the same place? Would we still attract people like M.N. Roy or Rash Behari Bose? We wouldn't. I don't think we would.
Maybe floating around here, but
Time will tell. Thank you very much. So over to you, sir.
Thank you for this illuminating discussion. Before we conclude, I request Dr. Ohri to felicitate the three dignitaries on stage with a token of appreciation from the Value of Words group. May I please request Dipankar Arun sir to come on stage and felicitate Dr. Ohri.
What a cracker of a session from Rash Behari. His wife, Japanese wife, they still have this restaurant in Japan. And the generations are carrying forward. Pallavi Iyer writes about that. And but before that, the chairman of the session, who got everybody on fire here. Where's the photographer? Over there. So Pallavi Iyer has been writing from Tokyo, about the lovely Kavi, his Japanese wife and his offspring. There's another thing very good is the institutional, memory, which institution which he tried to create. Morning we were having a discussion on Tagore, somebody on Shanti Niketan. Somebody said, Shanti Niketan is no longer what it used to be because the institution didn't carry. So did that.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. The next session, which is a book launch of the book titled The Secret Laughing Pagoda, where Shachi Negi ma'am is in conversation with Ruby Gupta ji, and the session is chaired by Bijoya ma'am. The session starts in 2 minutes. Please remain on your seats. Thank you.